Okay, we are back at B3 in depth. Wonderful every month conversations with wonderful people from all over the world. My name is Johannes Grenzfurtner, long and complicated German name. I'll not talk about it in any more detail, but just for you who are new to the program, I'm an artist, filmmaker. My new film, Masking Threshold, was premiered at Fantastic Fest last year. And actually, today, right after this conversation, I'm going to the Diagonale to have the Austrian premiere. But it's not about me today. It is about our wonderful guest. It's actually the first ever night I'm interviewing.
Well, OBE, not night, exactly.
OBE,
That you've
you have to
promoted me.
explain me the difference. I have no idea. But the wonderful thing about you, Adrian, is like there is no way, in no way can your life be summarized into a couple of lines. I mean, at the moment, you are best known for being the chief officer of Film London, but you were also like the acting director of the British Film Institute. You did so many things. You were a film producer. I don't even know where to start. And but it's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for being on the program.
No, it's a delight to be here with you and to be part of B3. As we've had a long relationship now, a very productive relationship with B3. I've loved attending the festival both virtually and in person, and there's a lot of collaboration and partnership agreement between Film London
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
B3.
And
So
you will be returning
yeah,
in autumn to the
I think
B3.
so. It's part of the B3 have asked me to be a sort of regular speaker at the festival, so I think I'm going to be coming and talking. Like last year, I was talking about a classic Hollywood movie, and I'll be back. I think I'll be back this year. Yeah, in October.
Oh, it was a fascinating talk. It was about the Maltese Falcon, I
That's
remember.
right. That's right. 70th
Wonderful.
anniversary of the Maltese Falcon and Dashiell Hammett and John Huston, and I'll be doing, I think, some more anniversary related programs of relating to classic cinema and this autumn as well as the other things that Film London is collaborating on with B3. So excited about that.
Wonderful. So let's start, or let's try to start in the beginning. So, how did you end up in the film scene? So, were you fascinated with it? How did that start?
I mean, the thing is, like I think, like most people, actually ending up in the film industry was a kind of accident. But I'd always loved movies. I mean, my kind of passions were always related to kind of art. English literature was a passion from a child. I was always a very big reader, and I studied literature at university. But hand in hand, I was equally interested in cinema from a young child. My mother and father, but my mother particularly, took me to the movies, took me to theatre, but took me to the movies from a very early age. And like a lot of people, I saw classic cinema, classic British cinema, classic Hollywood cinema first really on TV, and in the days in the UK when there were only 4 television channels, and I used to stay up far too late as a young boy watching classic film noir movies or musicals or whatever it might be, or classic British cinema, and my passion for literature and film kind of merged together, because I was always interested in how not classic novels, Dickens novels, Shakespeare, but how all these things got adapted into movies, and what that connection was. So when I finally got to university, I went to college, and this was a very long time ago. This is 1980. It was a bit of luck, because at the university I was attending, they introduced their first ever film studies course and invited the literature students to take it as part of their degrees. And I was the first intake that year in 1980 to do that. And as a result of that, I then was watching a huge amount of classic movies. I mean, sort of Eisenstein, Lang, Ozu, Kurosawa, as well as British and American material. And I gained that additional film history, and it was a big thing for me, because I didn't know anybody in the film industry. My parents come from a blue collar working class background. They had nothing to do with film, television, the arts. My father worked in building, and my mother was a bookkeeper, accounts. They had not, so I didn't know anybody that had anything to do with the creative industries at all. And it was only when I got to college and I suddenly met lecturers who brought in filmmakers, and they said to me, you should start writing for the university newspaper, you should be down at the Arts Cinema. And I befriended the guy that ran the local arts independent cinema in the university town I was in, which is Norwich in the east of England. And he became a real mentor and supporter to me, and he used to invite filmmakers and producers to come to the cinema from London, and I basically interviewed them for the university newspaper. And through that, I got to meet people like the film director Stephen Frears, who I met him first when I was kind of 19 years of age, and he's still a friend of mine to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Parker, I met for the first time in Norwich. He came there. The film producer David Putnam, I met for the first time there. Mike Newell, I met there. And I was just a kid. I was a kid at university writing for a university newspaper and studying. And then when I finished university, again, my lecturer said, you know, if you're not going to be a journalist or you're not going to be an academic, and I was doing some lecturing and a little bit of teaching, but he said you should go and see if you can get a job in the cinema. And I went back home to the Midlands and asked, and I walked into the local independent cinema in Birmingham in the Midlands of England, and there was an Irish guy there, a guy called Pete Walsh. And I said to him, look, I've been studying film at university. I got to meet these, can I have a job? And he basically gave me a job with no money to begin with at all, but he gave me a job. And I started working in the cinema. And then I went back to the east of England, to Norwich. The guy who ran the cinema in Norwich near my university said, I can give you a job working in the cinema whilst you do your postgraduate degree. And so I was working 6 nights a week in the cinema and doing the studying at the university in the daytime. And I did a postgraduate degree in film studies. And so I was combining the academic with the very, very practical, projecting films, selling tickets, locking up the cinema, doing all of that stuff. And then I applied to cinemas to become a curator, to become a programmer of the cinemas. And for 10 years around the UK, I worked in different cinemas and I became a programmer. And then I got the opportunity to build a new cinema in a place called Nottingham, where Robin Hood supposedly famously comes from, but, in the Midlands of England. And I built this new cinema called Broadway, and they started banging on to me about having a film festival. And I wanted to do a film festival that I was interested in. And I decided I wanted to do a noir festival, which we called Shots in the Dark. We launched it. And I was very lucky. I was very, very lucky because I didn't know many of the filmmakers, but I just wrote to these filmmakers and said, well, I've started this new festival. Would you come? And Claude Miller came, and Sam Fuller came, and probably most famously, I met Quentin Tarantino at the premiere of Reservoir Dogs in Cannes and said, "I've got this film festival. What will you come?" And he came, and it was kind of practically a riot because we did the first ever screening of Pulp Fiction as a surprise screening at Shots in the Dark, and
oh wow.
And the festival got all this. The first ever screening of Silence of the Lambs in the UK was at Shots in the Dark. So there was the festival was, in a relatively small Midlands town, not London, but we got a disproportionate amount of attention and publicity because the filmmakers, because we were the only crime mystery noir festival in the UK, one of the only ones in the world, and all these filmmakers from around the world and writers, lots of really famous writers came to the festival, great crime writers, Elmore Leonard, and lots of American, all kinds of different writers came from everywhere. And we got an enormous amount of attention. And that was a real, I was building on, because I'd sort of, done work as a film critic, and I'd got to meet a bunch of filmmakers, and I got to know Scorsese quite well, Quentin Tarantino quite well. And the whole combination of that meant that I was then appointed to run the National Film Theatre and the London Film Festival. And I moved to London. and worked for the British Film Institute then for 10 years. And that's really how it started. I started in cinema, festivals, and then I went to work for the BFI, and I ran the National Film Theatre and the London Film Festival, and had a lot of fun, curating and programming the London Film Festival, and got to meet most of my heroes in terms of film, directors and performers and producers, and that sort of really meant my career sort of really got underway because of going to work in a cinema, and then
I just wanted to ask because you were like really hands-on working, like selling tickets in cinemas. I think that also gives you a certain, I guess, a strong connection also to the audiences, I guess.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, I don't think, the academic work was really important for knowledge, and being able to learn to research, and to learn about the whole history of cinema. It was incredibly important. But the reason I ended up in the film industry was because of that practical experience on the ground. I learned how cinema exhibition, festivals, distribution worked. I learned how to program and curate, but I learned, how to manage the budget of a cinema. I learned how to supervise people, to manage people, and also I learned about working with filmmakers and working with creative talent. I think because I researched so much, I think I managed to convince all the filmmakers I came in contact with that I cared about their work, that I respected their work, that I was interested in their work, that I wanted to celebrate their work and help them explain their work and promote their work. And that's never left me. I think that's why I've been lucky that most of the filmmakers I've ever met and interacted with, I've maintained a relationship with over many years, that because they realized that I respected what they did and cared about what they did. And then, when I eventually was asked to set up Film London, and that has the Locations Commission for London and the National Locations Commission, the British Film Commission. The filmmakers knew me because I'd presented their work in festivals and cinemas, and they knew me, and so they rang me up to troubleshoot if they had a problem making a film in London, or they wanted some help. They knew that, and I think that's why I got the job. I got the job because I knew the filmmakers, and I knew the production companies, and I knew the producers. And so they felt a certain amount of trust when I set up Film London, that because I respected their work, they knew I'd try and help and troubleshoot when they were actually making stuff. And that's, I've carried on. I've obviously run Film London, and I've carried on being a curator and programmer and lecturer, in parallel. I do the two things together because I love doing both.
Yeah. I always found it fascinating seeing like the BFI logo in front of films, and that it so bluntly says like it's financed by British Lottery.
Yeah,
It's,
well, that's part of the deal.
yeah,
The government is very keen to demonstrate that the lottery does fund British culture, and the BFI is, it's part of the legal requirements to do that. But the lottery, I mean, it's interesting because we've had the lottery in the UK now a long time, and it's funded an awful lot. It's given a lot of support to Film London, support to the British Film Commission, support to the filmmakers. It's been, I mean, it's actually been a real bonus, because without it, an awful lot of British film and culture generally just wouldn't have been supported. It was, everyone was wondering whether it was going to work at the beginning, but it has been a very, very good thing for the arts and culture in the UK.
yeah, it's an interesting form of redistribution.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. People buying lottery tickets, and that money being split by charities and good causes, and a lot of, millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds gone into theatre, music, film, but also other charitable
Yeah.
works for young people and deprived people as well.
I wish something like that would happen in Austria. Really, honestly, it's a great system.
I think it is. I mean, we're very lucky that the government agreed it in that sense, and it stayed there. And and people have carried on supporting it, and certainly it, yeah, without it we wouldn't have you know, in a sense, the two things that underpin our film industry and film culture in the UK are the lottery funding and the tax credits. You know, those two things together. Without them, we would really struggle to have a film industry. We really would.
Does Brexit in any way, like, do you feel that there's a change going on because of Brexit happening and stuff like that, or is there? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think, of course, Brexit has changed things, and you know, from my point of view, as I think I've said at forums at B3, but I've said on lots of European forums, my job at Film London and the British Film Commission is to make sure that, as far as filmmaking and the creative industries, is that the change to our political status in the UK with Europe doesn't get in the way of creative talent and companies and agencies and festivals and filmmakers working together, which is why, you know, we signed a partnership agreement with B3. It's why we signed an agreement with the Spanish Film Commission just before Christmas. Why we'll be signing more agreements, because I want to make it quite clear that we might not be part of the EEC, but we're still a European country, a European city, and we still want European partnership, European creative collaboration. We want to share, you know, whether it's sharing ideas, sharing talent, things about skills, things about diversity, things about environmental sustainability. There's all kinds of opportunities for us to work together, and I mean, we are doing that with Spain. We're doing that with Germany. We're doing that with Italy. We're talking to France about how things we can do. So, you know, the politics is over there, you know, and that's not my job. You know, my
It's
job
kind of
isn't
like despite the politics.
yeah, exactly. My job is to make things as smooth, as frictionless as possible, to oil the wheels so that we can demonstrate we want to be and are determined to be good European partners, good European friends, as far as our film, television, our screen industries are concerned. That is a really big part of my job. And I'm, you know, I going around virtually and in person around to all different European countries and cities to say that and to do that and to, you know, show it, to prove it by doing things practically and showing up and working out how we can work together. I did, as well as doing this today, I've just done something online for the Catalonian Film Commission, talking about how we're going to work together. So you know, there are all kinds of changes, and what it's not made really any difference to our international relationships with the US film industries, with North America, none at all. You know, we've never seen so much film and television production in the UK going on of large-scale film and large-scale high-end television. I mean, the figures are remarkable: billions and billions of pounds spent. And the other part of my job is to ensure that we have enough stage space, we have enough training, we have enough skills for our, you know, for our young people to get into the industry, because we've got a huge array of job opportunities. So in that sense, neither COVID nor Brexit has made any real difference to the economic health of our film and television industries. But the bureaucratic obstacles, whether it's about visas, work permits, or our tax regulations, are things that we are determined, with friendship and collaboration and exchange, to overcome those obstacles. Because what I say, and I'm sure you as a filmmaker appreciate this, filmmakers don't care about borders. Filmmakers don't care about bureaucracy. They're not interested in regulations. They want to work together. They want to develop ideas together. They want to show their films in different places together. And my job is to make that as easy as possible, and to ensure that the change to our political status is not in any way undermining the ability for us to work with, whether it's in Austria, in Germany, or France, Spain, Italy, or Slovenia.
Yeah. Yeah, the question would be like maybe there are producers or filmmakers watching this, so and they might not even have thought about the possibility to do something in London or in the UK in general. What would be a possible step? Like, would they contact you, or
Yeah.
what would happen?
Basically, they can look at the www.filmlondon.org.uk or www.bfc British Film Commission.org.uk. There's a whole range of information and services on there about everything to do with the London film industry and then the British Film Commission, the whole of the UK, in terms of information about the tax credits, the film, television, animation tax credits that we have. Also, film things about, just as you have in Austria and Germany, we have regional funds as well. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the nations and the regions. Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland all have distinct regional funds and support mechanisms in addition to our tax credits that they can offer people who are wanting to make things there. We're infrastructure is developing all over the UK, so the studio space is being developed in Wales, Scotland, and England, as well as London and the southeast. And we and the those facilities are reflected in, again, the information we have online. And you can look at Film London or British Film Commission on Instagram and Twitter as well. I mean, uh, there is also regional funds in Liverpool and Birmingham and Yorkshire, and the first step is they could come and talk to us. Basically, contact us via our websites. We'll be in Cannes, and based at the UK Pavilion, so people can, German producers, whoever they might be, can come and talk to us in Cannes. We're present at different places. Say we'll be at B3. I'll be at B3 with my colleagues in October. So filmmakers can talk to us there, and it's worth emphasising that that apart from and B3 is very interested in artist moving image. We showcase every year with B3 our artist moving image work, which is often the artists who are making artist moving image, whether it's installation or gallery work, as well as single screen work, are often collaborating with a variety of international other countries other than the UK, and we always present a selection of that artist's work in B3. So again, if you want to talk about collaboration between visual artists and artists moving image, you can talk to us about that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for conversation and dialogue. There's a lot of opportunities for collaboration, and again, my message is, either contact us online, send us an email, or arrange to see us, at one of the festivals or markets. And the next one that's coming up is Cannes, and we'll all be there, and very happy to talk.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, in our little pre-talk before the recording started, I got a little info about you, that you're planning some talks at the B3. Especially, I heard of like 3 interesting personalities that you want to tackle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, this is subject to working it through with B3, but
Sure, of course, yeah.
I have been talking very recently, because I'm in the middle of a series of talks about The Godfather, for example, because it's the 50th anniversary, and I've been doing illustrated talks about The Godfather's anniversary, both Godfather 1 and Godfather Part 2. Obviously, there is also a new mini series called The Offer, which is about the making of The Godfather, because, as some people will know, The Godfather, not only one of the most successful and critically acclaimed films of all time, but was also the drama about the making of it is almost as
Oh yeah, like
dramatic as the film.
Coppola was like wasn't even planned in the beginning to direct it, and there's like
No,
lots
no,
of
it's crazy. I
back
mean,
and
they didn't
forth.
want Marlon Brando, they didn't want Al Pacino. It's kind of, nobody wanted the cast that became the cast. Nobody wanted the director. Nobody. I mean, and then you have the mafia involvement, on the sides, and trying to, it's an extraordinary story. So I've been talking about that because of its 50th anniversary. This year would have been the 75th birthday of David Bowie, who obviously had a very real engagement with Germany, and particularly with Berlin, recorded some of his greatest work. I'm a huge fan of his, and I'm really interested in his film and television career, and I've been doing work recently particularly about his interest in Germany and his interest in Brecht and the fact that he acted in a television production of Basel, Brecht's first play, and it's a really interesting because Bowie was really interested in German filmmakers like Fassbinder and Wenders. He was interested in trying to collaborate with them. That didn't happen, but he did do this actually very little seen television production directed by a really brilliant British film director called Alan Clark, and so I've been doing something about that, David Bowie's film career, and also how he got interested in Brecht and how he ended up being in Basel. And the other thing that I've been involved in for many years is that because of my interest in literature, I was always a very big, and I am a big passionate fan of the work of Charles Dickens. And Charles Dickens is the most adapted novelist in the history of cinema. There have been, since
Yeah,
1898, essentially, Dickens has been adapted. And there are an extraordinary array of movies from all over the world, that
I
have
mean,
been
just the Christmas Carol, like how
Yeah, I
many,
mean,
like
Christmas
there are like
Carol.
an endless
Yeah,
number of films just about the Christmas Carol.
yeah, absolutely endless animation, TV, feature film. And you look at the way in which that's been adapted, and it's also very interesting about Dickens' work that the way he wrote, because he was really fascinated. He died before cinema was invented, but he was interested in the precursors of cinema, like the magic lantern and the kinetoscopes and all those early optical toys. He was fascinated by them. He used to do magic lantern shows himself. So the idea of the movies, before it was realized, Dickens understood that this was coming. And if you read Dickens, actually his descriptions read like scripts in certain ways. That certain of the novels are extraordinarily cinematic, and Eisenstein famously wrote an essay called Dickens, Griffith, and the Art of Film, and it was Eisenstein who said that actually it was in Dickens' writing that he'd invented editing and montage before
Oh,
cinema
interesting.
existed. Yeah, so I've always been interested in that relationship between Dickens and cinema. Well, this year is the 210th birthday of Dickens, and I've done a lot of work on the history of Dickens in film and television. And in fact, I made a documentary a few years ago about Dickens in film, and so we may do something about Dickens in film this year as well.
Ah, looking forward. I hope all of this will really happen.
We'll have to see. The
I
organisers of
hope
the festival will
and I hope
determine.
we're not promising too much, but it's been lovely. But in general, what is your perspective? I mean, we can't really say that cinema is a new medium. I mean, it's already like 150 years old or something like that. But it is fascinating to see how fascinated people are still with film, and it's such a low entry level of art form, because I mean, if you go to a modern art exhibition or if you read literature, whatever it is, you always need some kind of like pretext, or you need someone to help you into understanding what's going on. With film, it's just like people going to the cinema, and it doesn't even matter if they watch a Werner Herzog or if they watch like a Michael Bay movie, whatever it is. There is a common grammar, like a cultural grammar, and everyone understands it. So do
No,
you think that's part of the thing why cinema is still around, or what is your perspective?
no, I think that's absolutely true, Johannes. I think the thing is that cinema, it was famously described as the seventh art, and I think because it essentially absorbs fashion, music, architecture, it folds lots of other art forms into itself in a visual vocabulary that we all have absorbed and kind of understand, is that our comprehension of that visual vocabulary is as you say, it's kind of instant. And it's extraordinarily accessible. There's massive changes in our viewing patterns, our consumption, the way in which people like more and more shorter material. You look at what happened with Google and now TikTok,
Yeah.
and Instagram. What's happened with those? But the consistent thing is that we're not bored with content, whether it's documentary, whether it's narrative or non-narrative. We're not bored with it. We are consuming more and more and more of it. We want endlessly more and more of it. And as you said, the other thing is that because of modern technology, it's actually, even though expensive films and television programs are phenomenally expensive, you can make a film on this, and that's the kind of change. I think that the technology has made, on one hand, you've got a lot of the things I deal with, film and television, which is like a huge circus with thousands of people and incredible costs, and we do a lot of work making sure that those things can happen and get into the studios, get out and in a location. But actually, filmmaking has become a much more democratic and accessible process, because of the mobility and the cheapness of the technology. And it's allied to the fact that it's a very democratic and a very accessible art form. Nobody thinks of film as being for the rich, or
Yeah.
for the privileged. People, when they think about opera or theatre, they think maybe differently about it. Is that accessible to me? Is that something I want to go and consume? But actually, everyone can consume the movies, and everyone has favorite movies. There's very few people, or television set, very few people say, "Oh, I'm not interested in that."
Yeah.
Somebody's always got something that they like, and the thing is that with the streamers, there's more and more content. It's almost impossible to keep up with it, but it doesn't seem to matter, because actually people still want that more. And every day I seem to have a conversation where people saying, "Have you seen that?" And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes I have, and a lot of the time I haven't. And
Yeah.
we're
But there's so
constantly,
much out there. It's like
yeah, there is,
incredible. Yeah. Yeah,
there is,
yeah, and I mean, and COVID, of course. I mean, we probably wouldn't have survived COVID if we wouldn't have the
no,
possibility of consuming
yeah,
something like being locked away at home.
yeah,
At the
I
same
think
time,
that's
it's
right.
interesting. I heard they did. I think it was in 2020. I think like at the end of 2020, they did this um, kind of questionnaire where they asked people what are the most important parts of society, let's call it, in Austria. And the artists were kind of like the last in the line, like the last ones. Of course, like like doctors and nurses and all that stuff, of course, on the very top because of the height of the pandemic.
Yes,
But at the same time, artists kind of like completely now, whatever, we don't need them. At the same time, everyone was sitting at home all the time, reading, watching movies. So there is a strange kind of like weird perception of what people art is, or what people
yeah,
think that creativity is. Yeah,
yeah. No, I think
because
I think you're
they don't even think that the new, I don't know, Netflix a series they are watching, that this is a creative industry, that there are artistic people involved in this, and they completely I haven't thought that this is art too. you know
No, and one of the things that again, is part of my job at both the British Film Commission and Film London, and I think we have had some success with this. Is making the wider world, making the public, but making actually our politicians on a national and a regional and local level understand that the creative industries have a real value, a real economic value, a real, that these are great opportunities for young people, that there's great careers involved, that people can have a long-term career, that this is not a Cinderella fly-by-night group of glamorous people who flit in and flit out, but actually this is as important in terms of revenues coming into the UK and jobs created as pharmaceuticals or oil and gas, and actually in terms of the size of the job opportunities, etc. We are now in the UK, but it's trying to get that across, and actually getting it across to skeptical parents as well when we're talking to people about looking at film and television as careers, and they say, well, I want them to be a doctor, I want them to be and I go, yeah, well, that's great, but actually these are really good opportunities and can be far more fulfilling, and the range of careers on whether it's a Netflix series or an independent film, the range of jobs, most people don't know, because they think writer, director, producer, actor, they just have no idea about the whole range of
And there's so much like sound design, like music. What do you do?
yeah,
Like
exactly,
even
and
prop making. A friend of
yeah,
mine is
well,
a really great
costume,
prop maker, and like
yeah,
he says
yeah,
it's the most fulfilling thing he's ever done is like making props for films.
well,
Yeah.
my daughter is in costume design. She all she wanted to do was do things with clothes and textiles when she was at school and college, and then she did a costume design degree. She interned, and she's been working on gigantic Marvel movies, and now she's working on a huge Netflix science fiction series. And she's in costume design, and she's got this fantastic career developing. She's only 26,
Yeah.
Beth is living the dream, and there are all these jobs that people just don't realize, and I'm sure that's true. As I say, it's not just true of the UK, because I know there are jobs being created all over Europe, but I think we all have a responsibility to try and educate people a bit more about the value of the creative industries, the value of the revenues, the jobs, the culture that this is contributing to, and why this is so important for our society. And that is definitely part of what we do as well. We're trying to promote and educate and inform people about that, because I don't think there's ever been a better time to try and be part of the film, and despite the pandemic, despite all the other uncertainties in the world, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be part of our industries, because it's growing so fast. There's so many opportunities, and again, it's just part of what I do to try and let people know about that more.
Mhm. I had this wonderful conversation with this young creative guy just like 2 weeks ago, and I kind of learned that he has like 100, like he's from Austria. He has like 100,000 followers on YouTube. Like he's like just like that's a quite significant number for like someone
Wow,
who's like 23 or something like that.
that is
Like,
a
and
significant number.
he makes like little animation films and stuff like that. And he was meeting with me, and he was asking me, hey, and he has this idea for like a feature film, and he doesn't really know, and I kind of like explained him what there is. He didn't even know that there is something like film funding, or that you could go to the city of Vienna and probably get 10,000 euros for a short film or something like that. He didn't even know any of that. And I thought like, hey, oh my God, like there are probably so many people out there who are in their YouTube world and in their I'm doing what I like to do anyways, and I'll put it on YouTube, and now I have 100,000 followers. But at the same time, they don't know anything about that there is actually a possibility for a career, that there is funding for this kind of stuff. Yeah.
No,
And so I guess that's also like part of your job, I guess.
it's absolutely part of our job and my job, and actually, because we know there are so many job creative opportunities being created because of all this work that's being made, and we've been talking to our friends in other European countries about sharing information about this, and how we work on it together. Is that from Film London's point of view, we recently were talking to the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and his administration. And we said there are really a lot of opportunities for young people to be employed in the creative industries, to be employed particularly in film and television, and we need more support to make people aware of this, to create more training programs, to create a bridge between people being at college or university and the workplace. And the mayor said, okay, well, we're going to make some funding available, apply for this funding. And we've brought together a consortium of universities, of further education colleges in the UK, together with a whole range of employers, including people like Universal and Netflix and others. And we've created this thing called it's called a new Creative Skills Academy, and a hub, and we're going to start offering new training programs to bridge people coming from other training or other academic background into jobs in film and television. We have this thing which we're building this on, really, which is called the Equal Access Network, where we basically have a network of something like 3,000 young people from the different communities of London, and we're using that as the basis of this. But together with these colleges and universities, we're going to embark on all this training, and part of that training is about promoting to young people what the opportunities are. So it's a really big new program for us at Film London, that's taking up a lot of our time, but it's very exciting, because the mayor sort of listened to what we had to say and realized that was an opportunity for young people. So that's the next big program that we're doing in the UK.
Wonderful. Could you tell me a little bit about some, let's call it success stories of Film London, some like TV shows or movies that people even in Austria might know that you have been involved in?
Well, I mean, there's obviously lots of things over the years, but I mean, obviously both in London and ringing London, we have the big studios, the Palmwoods, the Sheppertons, the Elstreys, and if
So
you think
that's all
about,
part of London. That's not outside
well,
of London.
they're part of what you call Greater London
Greater London.
and
Okay.
South East, and obviously they shoot in London, they use talent of London, they come in and out of London. So there's a real kind of dynamic between the studios and London, and whether it's all the Mission Impossible films, including the most recent two, and one that's still being shot, the all the Harry Potter films, and now the new ones, Fantastic Beast. You've had all these huge television series like, The Crown, Black Mirror, Game of Thrones in Northern Ireland and in other parts of the UK. But then there's lots of,
Black Mirror is a great example for something that exploded. I mean,
yeah,
really, yeah.
absolutely exploded. And you've got Outlander in Scotland, and his Dark Materials, in Wales, and and films like, whether it's Wonder Woman, The Eternals, which shot entirely
Yeah.
in the UK.
Oh, it's
And
true. Yeah, because I mean, most of it is in green screen anyway, so it
yeah,
doesn't.
and the location work is done at just limited location work done outside the studios. But there's been, I mean, say it's almost difficult to list of course, the Bond movie, but then you've got extraordinary, kind of things like Belfast, being shot in Belfast, the Kenneth Branagh film, which of course recently won the Oscar and the BAFTA, and some brilliant kind of small independent films that have been picking up awards, and even a film that wasn't shot in the UK but was produced by British talent with Jane Campion was The Power of the Dog, which was a British
Oh
and kind
wow.
of Australian co-production, and its producers are British, and so there's an awful lot of creative, really exciting kind of creative activity. Lots of huge filmmaking and filmmakers making stuff here. I don't know whether, I mean, one of the biggest success stories, which is a Netflix show, which is incredibly popular over here. I don't know about Austria. Is Bridgerton, and
Yep.
Bridgerton entirely shot in London, and we were involved in that from its inception, with its television production company Shondaland. But as I say, that the list, Gangs of London, and you've got Peaky Blinders being shot, in different parts of the UK, including Manchester. You've got, so there kind of isn't anywhere really in the UK. I mean,
Yeah.
London
Yeah.
itself, but anywhere in the UK where there isn't an awful lot of large scale production. Last Night in Soho, the Edgar Wright's movie, was started under lockdown, stopped, and then restarted. Jurassic World.
Oh yeah, the new one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the new one was there. You've got Death on the Nile actually as well, the other Kenneth Branagh movie, shot on location, but also in the studios in Longcross. in the south west. Yeah, the list. I mean, the list is almost
An
endless.
endless list, an endless list. I hope we will see some of the smaller, more independent ones at B3.
Well, I'd like to
Yeah.
hope that you'll certainly be seeing some of the artist moving image work, and yes, because there's some wonderful movies that I really love. There's a film which won the BAFTA awards, which I don't think has been shown in Germany yet, called After Love, which is a wonderful story set between France and the UK, which is a really beautiful film. But yeah, there's a lot of really incredibly kind of talented filmmaking and filmmakers, going back and forth from the UK to Europe and being based here, and our studios that's why we're building more. Our studios are very busy. Our cast and crew are very busy, and as I said, it's very exciting. But then when I talk to my friends in Germany, I talk to my friends in France or Spain, they say they're building and they've got enormous amounts of work, and I think this is a global production boom that we have, and everyone's running around, in trying to make sure they've got the infrastructure and the talent to support it.
Wonderful. So we're almost at the end of our conversation. I could talk to you for hours, but I have one last question because Katharina told me that you have an interesting connection or like an interesting uh, interest in Elvis. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I can. I
I'm
mean,
super interested.
it's something I mean, my whole life. I mean, the other passion I have in life, apart from film and literature, is music, and I've always loved popular music, rock, pop, soul, jazz. But it started really with Elvis, because when I was a kid, my uncle, my dad's youngest brother, was an Elvis fan, and when he was in his early 20s and I was just a 6-year-old, I remember watching Elvis on TV, because the Elvis movies were always on TV in the UK, in the 1960s and 1960s, 1970s,
Yeah.
and
He was in a really bad contract doing those movies.
but
You know the
but
story
but
probably.
the
Yeah.
movies were really popular, and because it was the only way you could ever see Elvis, because at that point he wasn't touring, he wasn't in Las Vegas, he wasn't anywhere, he was only in the movies. And of course, some of the most famous records he ever made were made for the movies, the 50s movies, whether it's Jailhouse Rock, Lovely Me Tender, etc., or things like Return to Sender from Girls, 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 or Blue Hawaii, or Can't Help Falling in Love. They were all movie songs, and it was my uncle that first played me Elvis records, and I first fell in love with his voice. And then I would see him on television, and the first record I was ever bought, when I had my first ever record player, was the soundtrack to Girls, 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 because I loved Return to Sender so much, and my mom bought me the LP, and I carried on really kind of loving Elvis my whole life. And I was very lucky, because I was interested in the movies, and I was interested in the story behind the fact that he spent 10 years of his life making nearly 30 movies.
Yeah.
And the fact that some of those movies were actually directed by remarkable directors, like King Creole being directed by Michael Curtiz, the director of Casablanca.
Yeah.
The fact that Flaming Star was directed by Don Siegel, who went on to do all the Dirty Harry movies. The fact that, as a child actor, Kurt Russell was in an Elvis movie. The fact that, he acted with... So there was all these interesting connections for me about Elvis in the movies. And so I started doing research and doing talks about Elvis in the movies. And Turner Classic Movies contacted me, and they were going to do a showcase on Elvis. So I did a series of introductions for Turner Classic Movies channel on Elvis and the movies. And then a friend of mine who became an Academy Award-winning director, a guy called Morgan Neville, who got the Academy Award for Best Documentary for 20 Feet from Stardom. Well, Morgan contacted he and Elvis's biographer. Elvis's biographer is a guy called Peter Guralnick. And I was interested in getting him to come to London to talk about Elvis on stage. and we became friends. And he said, you really need to do more about Elvis and the cinema and the movies. It's not what I want to do. He said, but I am going to do a documentary on the guy that discovered Elvis, a guy called Sam Phillips of Sun Records, who discovered Elvis, first recorded Elvis. I said, oh, that's interesting. He went away, and then a year or two later, he rang me and he said, we finished the documentary. This young director called Morgan Neville directed this documentary. Would you like to see the documentary and maybe show it in London, show it at the London Film Festival? And I said, great. And he said, okay, we'll send you the movie. Couldn't send me a link at that point. He was going to send me a VHS. And he sent me the movie. But then he rang me and said, oh, by the way, Sam Phillips wants to come to London and present the movie. And I said, the guy who discovered Elvis, Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, wants to come to London. And I practically fell off my chair. And to get a long story short, he came to London. The only time he ever left the United States in 2000, he left. I had a week hosting Sam Phillips in London, presenting him on stage, talking about Elvis. And then he invited me to Memphis. And I got my own personal tour of Graceland. I hung out with Sam in Memphis, went to all of the Elvis sites, and became friends with his family, and established this kind of personal connection. And with some of Elvis's friends, Jerry Schilling, who was a close friend of Elvis's and worked with Elvis. And I'm working right now. I'm trying to develop a podcast and hopefully a documentary for the future on Elvis and the movies. And it's really interesting this year because, of course, there's the Baz Luhrmann biopic coming out in June, which is going to be really interesting. So no, Elvis is a big passion of mine, a big part of my life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing so many of your passions with us. You mentioned it just recently that you are doing a podcast. Maybe you want to pitch that for a second.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm working on a podcast, a separate podcast on Elvis, but actually Film London has a podcast which will be returning. They're all currently on our website. We did a lot about different areas of actually filmmaking. I interviewed, and my colleagues interviewed a lot of filmmakers, musicians, producers, which are on the Film London podcast, and a new Film London podcast, a season will be coming along in the next couple of months, which will be picking up. So you can access that through the Film London website, and it's got a lot of really interesting filmmakers, independent filmmakers, and producers, and people on there talking about what they do and their latest work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure, as always, talking to you. I hope to see you in person in autumn. And thank you so much. And for all the people out there, there will be information, in the YouTube comment section and all that stuff, where with links and all additional informations about Adrian. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Johannes. I hope your premiere goes well tonight, and look forward to seeing you in the autumn at B3.
Hey folks, and dear ladies and gentlemen of whatever gender you prefer, that was another episode of B3 In Depth. If you want to see future episodes, please subscribe somewhere down here. I hope to see you in the future, and I hope you join the debate. Thanks.